Hello everyone, my name is Michaela and once again this is LycanhoodReads. Welcome and thank you for joining me today. Today I wanted to go ahead and get into a January wrap-up video. It's towards the end of January right now and I'm actually home quarantined because of COVID, unfortunately. But while I have the time on my hands, I figured I might as well get this done. I haven't really felt like reading while I was sick too much. Mostly been watching TV and napping. So I don't think I'll get any more books finished before the month ends. So I wanted to go ahead and wrap it up. I feel pretty good about what I did accomplish this month anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in. My very first read of the year was, of course, The Empire's Ruin by Brian Staveley. This was a book that I got in my Christmas book haul with my Christmas money. I've been waiting for it. It came out earlier this year, I think in August or July. But of course, this continues the Chronicle of the Unhewn Throne. This is a new series in that same world. It's called The Ashes of the Empire, I believe. Ashes of the Empire. And this is the first book, The Empire's Ruin. I was super excited for it, and it did not disappoint. I wanted it to be my first read of the year, and it kind of was. It was the first physical book I read, but I ended up reading an audiobook, finishing that before this one. It took me a while to read because this book is devastating. It devastated me, you guys. I jumped into it and I was like totally ready to like plow through it. But the first chapter, even in the first chapter, Brian Staveley came out swinging, and he just that first chapter it destroyed me. And that's totally the point. It's exactly what he meant to happen. Where he takes everything you know about this character. Of course, we've got Gwenna Sharp here on the cover, and I would say she's the main character of this trilogy. Even though there are two other perspectives, she's kind of the center point for sure, the focal point. And she's what I was super excited about. Of course, if you've read Chronicles of the Unhewn Throne, you know Gwenna Sharp was a character in the Chronicles of the Unhewn Throne. She even has some perspectives in the later books. But she has some great character development in that trilogy, and she gets her chance to be the star in this one. But it takes everything, that first chapter, this whole book, it takes everything you know about her and it just rips it apart and it makes her as a character build herself up from the bottom all the way back up again until she's a totally new person. But I still love her. But this book is about Gwenna in pain. That's what it should have been called. And it's really quite a journey that we go on. So other than Gwenna Sharp, this book also has Akil. You may remember him from The Emperor's Blade. He was Caden's best friend at the monastery at Ashkelon. He was a thief, and he was not a very enthusiastic monk, but he managed to survive the slaughter at Ashkelon at the end of The Emperor's Blades. If you haven't read The Last Abbot of Ashkelon, it's a short story published by Tord by Brian Staveley, and it takes place after the end, or like during the raid on Ashkelon. I suggest you go read it. It's super short. Like I said, it was published in a magazine, so very short. You can find it online for free. And I do suggest you read it before reading this one because Akil's part in this book kind of hinges on what happened in that. And it's super short but very relevant. So he's the second perspective in this book, and then the third is a character we haven't met before who is from Dumbang, which is, of course, the city that we spend a lot of time in Skullsworn, that Pierre is from. So it's the swamp-ridden city that worships the three gods of the swamp, and it's totally brutal. And that is the character. We spend a lot of time there with that particular character in this book as well. So three main perspectives. This book is, whew, don't read it unless you're ready because it's heavy. Like I said, it took way longer for me to finish than I expected it to, just because of how heavy the stuff that was happening was and how devastating some of it was. But it really comes back. Like, and I don't say any of that in a bad way. Like when I say it's devastating, when I say it's heavy, yes, but in a really rewarding sort of way. And it just takes everything from the Chronicles of the Unhewn Throne and it turns it up to a 10. And honestly, I care about most of these characters more than I cared about Caden or Adair. I always loved the brother that was a catch-all. I don't know why I can't remember his name right now. I always loved his perspective the most in the Chronicles of the Unhewn Throne, and the other two siblings were just like what I had to get through to get back to him. And I don't feel that way in this book. Like, I did want to keep going back to Gwenna, but everything still felt really relevant, and I feel way more invested in these characters than I did in those. This was amazing. If you haven't read the Chronicles of the Unhewn Throne, I highly recommend it. It's a grimdark fantasy trilogy that's unique in a market that's kind of flooded right now with grimdark fantasy. And this is the first book in a new trilogy by Brian Staveley, and it's off to one hell of a start, let me tell you. At the same time that I was reading The Empire's Ruin, I was also reading Children of Ruin. So I started January with 2 books with Ruin in the title. What does that have to tell you? But I was reading Children of Ruin by Adrian Tchaikovsky on audiobook. And of course, that's the follow-up to his Children of Time sci-fi epic. And it was pretty good. I really liked it. I wouldn't say I liked it more than Children of Time, but it's definitely a worthy follow-up. And it had all the same interesting elements to it, just sort of continued and expanded on in an interesting way. I don't feel like as a sequel that it was totally necessary. And it didn't follow Children of Time the way that I expected it to. So I'm not going to say that I was disappointed by it, but I was a little thrown off by the direction it took. But still definitely an enjoyable read. If you enjoyed Children of Time, you should definitely read it. Just because it's more of that, whatever you want to call Children of Time, it's more. And it's super cool. So I enjoyed it. And of course I love Adrian Tchaikovsky's books on audiobook. I'm not sure who the narrator is. Maybe I can throw it up on the screen for you. But the narrator does a fantastic job, and the audiobook experience is really top-notch if you would rather read it that way. Next was just sort of a little free book that I had on Audible called 3 Parts Dead, and that was by Max Gladstone. Max Gladstone is, of course, the co-author of This Is How You Lose the Time War, which is a great little, are we calling it a novella? I'm not sure, but it's a short book or novella that I read last year. It's sapphic, time-traveling sci-fi. Max Gladstone co-wrote that, and this is a series that he wrote prior to that. This is from back in like 2012. It was like free with my Audible subscription called 3 Parts Dead. And it was okay. I might continue with the series. It was the first of a series. I didn't feel overly invested in it or overly impressed by it, but I have to say I did sort of enjoy reading it, and the fact that it was free with my Audible subscription was nice. So it might just be something that I sort of read when I'm in between things and don't have something else to read. And it has a black female main character, so that's something. Speaking of Audible, I actually have suspended my subscription to Audible for now, and I'm actually trying out Scribd for a little while. Nothing against Audible, it served me really well with my love of audiobooks these past couple of years, but it is rather expensive, so it's like $22 for 2 credits a month, so 2 free books a month, $22. That's not bad when you're talking about new releases, but I read more than 2 audiobooks a month, so that can sometimes be difficult, and I haven't tried Scribd yet, so I wanted to give it a shot. It's not only cheaper, but you have access to their entire Audible and ebook library. Audiobook and ebook library for the price of that subscription a month. So you can read as many as you can read for the price of your subscription rather than just getting the 2 books like at Audible. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there. Not going to be using Audible for a little while. Going to see how I like Scribd. I also read Until the Last of Me by Sylvain Neuvel, which is of course his follow-up to book 1 of Take Me to the Stars, which was called A History of What Comes Next. I actually am going to upload a full review for that one because I got it from Netgalley as a free advanced reader in exchange for an honest review. So I made a good little review video. I reviewed it on, Goodreads as well. So if you're interested in what I had to say about that one, it is a alternate history sci-fi first contact story in the signature Sylvain Neuvel writing style. I've been super impressed by it. I really enjoy it. And if you want to know more about it, go check out my review. One of the first books I read on Scribd on audiobook this month was Upright Women Wanted. And of course that's by Sarah Gailey, who also wrote American Hippo that I read last year. She's weird. And she obviously likes westerns. She likes to make the Wild West very queer, and I appreciate that. Upright Women Wanted is, again, it's very short. I think you would call it a novella or just a short novel, but it's pretty short, and it is about a queer girl who has run away from her hometown, away from a marriage she didn't want after her best friend and lover is executed for having queer materials. She runs away and joins this society of librarians who travel the western country, like selling education materials and on the down low selling illegal queer materials as well. And she joins up with them as they try to travel to like this sort of safe haven rebel space where people are free to be themselves, and she joins up with this queer gang of librarians and you travel with them to this safe haven. And that's all I'm going to say about it because it is pretty short, so I don't want to give anything away. But there is queer rep in it, and there is female stuff, and there is a non-binary character as well. So that's pretty exciting. If you're looking for gay cowgirls or cowboys, then that Sarah Galley is definitely where you want to look for that. I read that on audiobook, and the audiobook was pretty good, and that was the first thing I read from Scribd, so good first impression. Alright, last but not least, I read Plain Bad Heroines by, I'm totally blanking on the author's name right now, but I'll put it up on the screen. Plain Bad Heroines. I did not expect to read this. I was sort of not avoiding it, but like I thought I was going to read it back in October for my spooky reads season, but it didn't happen because I couldn't afford to buy it, and I just wasn't sure if I was going to like it because I'm definitely hit and miss with dark academia, and I'm not even sure that I would call this dark academia. Like, I'm a little weird about that genre because I don't fully understand the parameters of what qualifies as dark academia. Supposedly it's supposed to be like dark, gothic, murder mystery kind of stuff in a school, like a private school or a boarding school or something like that. And of course this takes place like on the grounds of a school, but you're not a student at the school. Like, that's not what's happening. And it's just, I don't know if it's dark academia, but you do get those spooky boarding school vibes, I guess. Overall, this book is super atmospheric. Like, yeah, it's great for an October spooky read, but it was also good for me, like, in the winter. Super atmospheric. You definitely get spooky. There's a lot of, like, creeping horror, maybe even a little bit of body horror in there. I honestly wasn't crazy about the plot, but the writing style was fantastic. The atmosphere was super fantastic. I liked the horror elements. I couldn't care less for the story, honestly. Like, the story was okay. I wasn't really driven by the plot of it because the plot is kind of all over the place and parts of it are boring. It's a dual timeline between sort of modern day Hollywood, where they're making a movie about this book, about this haunted boarding school, and then you also keep flashing back to the days when the boarding school was haunted, and you're primarily following the principal slash owner, sorry, the headmistress slash owner of the boarding school, who is a lesbian. So, yeah. So you're following like this original haunting, and then you're also following this movie they're trying to make a movie about the haunting while being haunted by the same haunting. And so those are the two timelines you're working with, and I honestly found a lot of the past timeline to be boring. Except for when there were horror elements. When the horror elements would come in, yeah, it was visceral and like super exciting, and it actually made me very uncomfortable in a good way. But the plot of what was happening there was dull, in my opinion. The Hollywood plot was a little bit better. I definitely liked the characters more. You've got this sort of superstar, lesbian, what do they call her? A celebrity, where she's like a lesbian celebrity. And I got a lot of kind of Katie McGrath vibes from this girl just because of the way that they would talk about people being obsessed with her on social media, and just in general is sort of the way that people thirst after Katie McGrath. And that's Harper. So you got her, she's a big superstar. You've got the B-lister who has never been in like a big major successful movie. Not a lot of people know her name, and she's sort of brought in to star alongside this superstar lesbian girl. And then you have the girl that wrote the book, that the movie is based on, and so she's sort of there as like a consultant or producer or whatever you want to call it, and they all three get entangled in this super homoerotic, haunting, polyamorous thing. Like, I don't know, it's really weird. And it's not that I love the characters, but it's so rare that these days, at least for me, to read a book where the most exciting part of the book is just listening to the characters talk to each other. And I did read this on audiobook, and so thumbs up to the narrator because she did a great job. But just these conversations they were having were thrilling. Like the back and forth, the banter between them, that was what was thrilling me. Not the plot, but just wondering what they were going to say to each other next and like where their conversations were going to go, where their relationships were going to go. It was a masterwork in dialogue, or at least I think it was, because and that took place in the past timeline too. I was also excited to see in that way, but the character dynamics in that timeline were not nearly as exciting to me as in the main story. Anyway, but yes, listening to the characters speak to each other and just wondering what they were going to say next and seeing where the banter was going to go and where their relationships and dynamics were going to go was my favorite part of this book, as well as the creepy, atmospheric, like, scary northeastern orchard that's haunted by yellow jackets sort of thing. I don't know. It was cool. I had a really fun reading experience with the audiobook. I highly recommend that. And just this book in general. Like I said, I wasn't blown away by the plot, but I still came out of it with a mostly positive attitude. Because the plot, like, the ending was a little disappointing, but I didn't care that it was disappointing because I didn't care about the plot. I just was along for the ride, and the ride was very satisfying. Just a little side note, while I was reading Bad Heroines, I was also binge watching Yellow Jackets on Showtime. And I feel like the shows pair really well together. There's not any sort of period piece element to Yellow Jackets, other than that it takes place in the 90s, which is totally my jam. But just the horror elements kind of fit really well together, and the connection of the Yellow Jackets. I just wanted to throw that in there, that if you had the chance to kind of pair these two, that makes for an interesting watching and reading experience. I also started reading Silk Fire by Zabe Ellor, I believe is how you say their name. That is another book that I'm getting from Netgalley as an advanced reader. I'm going to just read you the synopsis real quick. Set in a planet-sized matriarchal city where magic and technology freely bleed together, a male courtesan's quest for revenge against his aristocratic father draws him into an ancient struggle between dragons, necromancers, and his home district's violent history. That's just one part of it, but that's all I'm going to read. There's also a little hint of polyamory in this, but there are definitely queer elements. He's a courtesan. There's already been some gay elements to it, and I think there may be polyamorous elements as we go further along. I've just recently started it, and like I said, it is the end of January, so I won't finish it this month, I don't think, but I wanted to go ahead and mention it at the end of this, that I will be reading it, and I'll post an individual review for it as well as soon as I get a chance, since Netgalley and the publishers were nice enough to offer it to me. Hi folks, popping in here just for a second because I actually ended up finishing 2 more books after I filmed this video. So January's total is actually up to 8 books this month. I finished Silk Fire, which I got from Netgalley and put up a review on Goodreads. I'm not sure if I'll make a review video for it because it was overall kind of disappointing, and I mostly only have negative things to say about it, and I don't want to just put out super negative videos. But I did finish that one, and I was super grateful to get an early release copy, because even though I didn't end up liking it very much, it was a very interesting read, if nothing else. And I also just finished Silver in the Woods. I read it in one sitting, so I wasn't expecting to finish it, but there it is. I've been anticipating this one for a while, and I ended up really liking it. It's a nice little novella. So, back to the video. I'm going to be traveling a lot once I recover from COVID and once it's safe to travel. In February, I have a lot planned, so I'm not sure how many videos or how much reading I'll get done exactly, but of course I'll get back to you with a February wrap-up and hopefully with a review of Silk Fire as soon as I can. That book won't be out until a little later this year. Let me see. So Silk Fire is not coming out till July, so I have a little while to get a review out so you guys can see what I thought about it. Thank you so much for joining me. That's going to wrap up my January, and wish me luck getting over this illness. us, and everybody please stay safe.